Asia. He did them at a place in Northern Virginia with his first wife.
She was told by military leaders and their wives that this is normal.
What percentage do you think of these higher-up people are bisexual?
Oh, all of them. If they're in special operations, if they're Marines, they're all bisexual. They've all had to do it in order to get to be a bird colonel. The SEALs, it's kind of like the fast road to the top.
So a guy could not be a SEAL without having.
Oh, I don't believe so. I haven't met one that I don't believe would have done it. And judging from what a couple of colonels told me, it's just, that's the norm. It's just you women, you know, y'all are so sissy, y'all are just, you know, you don't understand how it is. We're under so much pressure. And when Valerie Wilhelm told me that about Charlie, I just could not believe.
Charlie Wilhelm would be a...
He's a general now down in Miami. And she was just saying, oh, well, you know, he's run around. He has to, she said. He's under so much pressure. And she was saying that, of course, I had met Charlie in Norway. And Charlie is sort of someone my husband just idolizes. And and Michael O'Boyle is another one. Michael is my husband's special friend.
After watching all 8 hours of her interview, when I see a top government official, I find myself wondering, did this guy get his promotion because he joined in on the homosexual sex? What about this guy? Or him? This one? Do the Air Force generals do it also? Kay Griggs implies that General Al Gray enjoys the homosexual sex, but I would expect some of the men to become fed up with it after a certain number of years. After all, how many times would you have to be pressured into homosexual acts before you refused to do it? Whoever has control of the U.S. government has to deal with the men who become rebellious. Kay Griggs suspects that murder was used to keep her husband under control.
And you see, my husband is frightened to death. I believe that his brother was murdered to keep him in, because he had gone through 4 years of this mind control. And the man who did it, you can see this on the video, his name was Charles Caddick, and another man named Alexander Robinson.
She also suspects other people were murdered, such as former CIA Director William Colby. She also mentions the technique of condemning a person to a mental institution, which almost happened to a person named Bob.
There were a couple of others. Paisley, who was murdered almost like this other man. Paisley was murdered like William Colby. Paisley was also hanging around with homosexuals. He went to the Rush River Lodge. That is the one. So did Bob Woodward. Bob Woodward, you know.
The reporter?
Yeah. Henry Kissinger was a well-known, totally a homosexual, not even both ways.
And so his wife is a marriage of...
oh, it's just a convenience. Yeah, and he might, you know, maybe he's discovered women in his late age, I don't know. But, no, I heard through a very well-grounded German that Henry's best friend's father told Henry to stay away from him, and that's why Henry left. The family were embarrassed, and Henry went to Britain, where they did this, and then changed his name from Heinz to Henry. And I interviewed a man named Bob, who's an Army enlisted person who told me about Henry in Cambodia. So he, up through Cambodia, he was actually raping young men. And of course, that experience destroyed the lives of these 5 young men, according to the source. I mean, he said he was crying, and this man was a perfectly wonderful, functioning, young married man who worked for a newspaper on the Eastern Shore, and had 3 young children, went to Vietnam as an enlisted man, was put in Cambodia, which he said it was a lie living there, and then ran into Henry Kissinger, or Henry Kissinger ran into him and did certain things to him, invited him into his tent with some other men. It was horrible, but it was, you know, he said it's wartime and so forth. But he said, you know, I could have taken it mentally if it had been a bunkmate or something. But he said, when it's someone like Henry Kissinger who does it to you, you're ruined. He said, I could never, he said he came back home. Oh, and this is interesting, and I really believe that Bob's right. He said, Kissinger said to him, if you ever tell anybody, if you ever mention a soul, it's the end of you. Don't you ever tell anybody. Well, when he got back, when Bob got back, he went to a special hospital, and they were going to keep him locked up forever.
Bob.
Bob. A lot of the other boys just, you know, my feeling is that he was flagged the way I was flagged when General Gray and, you know, Wilhelm had me flagged because I broke up the go-go dancing in the officers' club. I was labeled a troublemaker because I thought it was wrong for married men to be going out with topless go-go dancers in the officers' club dining room, and I took pictures of it, and my husband, you know, got really mad and so forth.
How could it be that all top government officials are willing to allow this corruption, rape, and blackmail? Kay Griggs says that the people in control of the government are grooming emotionally weak boys for top government positions. She explains that this recruitment process starts while the boys are teenagers or younger.
They have little boys that they pick out, and they call them special. They use the word special, meaning elite, irregular, in order to entice these boys because they don't have much ego.
They look for boys who are suffering from low self-esteem, poverty, and mental disorders. People who are not happy with themselves are easy to manipulate with praise, and children from poor families are more susceptible to promises of top government positions. She explains that some of these boys are put into all-boys schools and exposed to homosexual activities. She accuses a man named Charles Caddock of being one of the men who manipulated the young boys.
Charles Caddock was the bodyguard, quote-unquote teacher for these guys. So they would go out and play in the woods, and they were doing homosexual things with them.
She investigated her husband's background and believes that these people were pushing him into homosexual activities.
I called all these roommates at the Hun School and at Princeton. They told me things about George and, you know, holding hands with, you know, with Caddock and other people, about being a cheerleader and going off and so forth.
Not a cheerleader. This is a